So hello everyone, and welcome to our Get SFU Ready session on travel considerations for new international students starting their studies at SFU in September of 2020. My name is Jean Lomas, and I'm an international student advisor, immigration specialist at Simon Fraser University. I'm joined today by my colleague, Mei-Ling Gao, who is another immigration specialist in the International Services for Students, or ISS office, and by our colleagues Ricky Tu and Brittany Battel from SFU Health and Counselling Services, who you'll hear from later. So it's my honor and my privilege to congratulate you on your admission to SFU and to welcome you to our community. Before we dive into the presentation, I would like to just begin by respectfully acknowledging that SFU is located on unceded Coast Salish territory, the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and Katzie nations. Today's session is going to focus on travel considerations for new international students. Our aim today is to support you in your decision-making process when planning your travel to Canada and to help you make an informed decision as to whether and when to travel. Just to go over our agenda, we'll start with a very brief overview of our services at ISS. We'll then move on to cover some information about the different travel restrictions and exemptions in place at this time that may impact your ability to enter Canada, including some information on the mandatory quarantine period imposed by the Canadian government for international travelers. We're also very fortunate that our colleagues from SFU Health and Counselling Services have agreed to co-host this session with us. So in part two, Ricky Tu, who's a transition case manager, and Brittany Battel, who is a mental health nurse from SFU Health and Counselling, will speak a bit more in depth about self-isolation and how to care for your physical and mental health during self-isolation, as well as during the COVID-19 pandemic in general. We'll then move into our breakout rooms. As I mentioned, one for undergraduates and one for graduates, where you'll have a chance to ask any questions you might have. For those who registered for the live session, we'll also be sending an email after we say goodbye, probably on Monday, with a few resources to help you navigate everything that we discussed. I also just wanted to highlight one extremely important point for you to keep in mind as we move into the content. So as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted all of us over the past few months in really innumerable ways. The situation has caused and continues to cause a lot of uncertainty. So I know that you have a lot of questions, as do we often, even as advisors, and you're anxious to have them answered. And thank you, by the way, to those of you who submitted your questions in advance of the session. So we'll do our best to cover as many of your questions as we can. But please keep in mind that the scope of the session lies specifically within the realm of Canadian immigration policy, current requirements to enter Canada, as well as supporting your health and well-being, which is really paramount. And as the situation with COVID-19 continues to evolve on a near constant basis, and things are always changing, we may not have all the answers for you. And those that we do have may change or could even be changing as we speak. So I just want to be clear that the information we share with you today is current to the best of our knowledge as of today's date, which for those of you watching the recording, is August 7th, 2020. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's move on. So as I mentioned, I work in the International Services for Students, or ISS office at SFU. I'm extremely lucky and privileged to be part of an incredible team of caring and compassionate professionals. At ISS, we offer a range of non-academic services to help support your transition to SFU as an international student. You can see a list of the services we offer on this slide. I won't go into depth, as many of you have attended previous sessions, and those who haven't can watch the recordings if you'd like to know more. You can also find our contact information on this slide. So we offer advising a number of remote methods. Right now we're closed for in-person services, and we're all working remotely, which is why you might have just seen my cat jump into the frame. Not sure if she made it past the virtual background or not. Another great resource, and probably the first one I would encourage you to access when you have questions, is actually our website, which you can see in large, bold red font here, which is completely intentional. So here you can find welcome guides to help navigate your transition to SFU. and instruction guides covering a wide range of topics and application processes, COVID-19 updates, and more. So that might just save you some time if you're looking for an immediate answer, since a lot of them are actually right there on the website. So moving on. So before I hand the floor to my colleague Mei Ling, I would just like to make sure that we're setting the appropriate expectation for the session. You might have noticed that we named this workshop Travel Considerations and not How to Get into Canada, because really the assessment of whether and when to travel is going to be unique to each student, and every situation comes with its own set of circumstances. The Canadian government is also not encouraging travel at this time for anyone who does not have a need to be here. I also want to recognize that immediate travel to Canada may not be the right decision for you at this time, even if it's possible to do so. And that's okay, because it's your decision to make. So here are some of the questions that we'd like you to consider as we proceed through this session. So first, do you meet the requirements to enter Canada right now? As we'll discuss, there are a number of restrictions and exemptions in place. And if you don't meet the requirements, then the rest of the considerations may not be quite as relevant to you. Is it in your best interest to be here? So how comfortable are you with international travel at this time, with getting on a plane? And especially during a global pandemic, where will you feel safest and best supported, particularly given the risk that things can shift and change without notice? Like I said, your safety and your well-being is really the most important thing at the moment, and really always. Do you need to be here? So for example, are there reasons why staying outside of Canada to begin your studies online would be unrealistic or impossible at this time? That could be the case for many of you. What are your options? What are your priorities? So this is kind of a need versus want. So given that the majority of the fall 2020 term will be online, we are encouraging those who don't have a need to travel not to do so. And again, that's to a certain extent, that's an assessment that you will need to make for yourself. And lastly, if you do travel to Canada now, or if you don't, how can you best ensure your well-being as you start your studies at SFU? So our Health and Counselling Services colleagues will get into this a little bit more in depth, but I do want to acknowledge that fall 2020 will not be an average term for anyone. So consider, especially if you haven't been to Canada before, how it will be to adjust to a new culture and a new academic environment in this time of necessary physical distancing, which can feel quite isolating. And given that most of SFU's activities in fall 2020 will be conducted online, which means that you could conceivably participate in them regardless of your location. With all of that being said, I'm now going to pass the floor to my wonderful colleague, Mei Ling Gao, who's an International Student Advisor Immigration Specialist, and she's going to go over the current travel restrictions and exemptions for entry to Canada.
Thank you, Jane. Hello, and welcome everyone to join us today at the sessions on travel consideration. My name is Mei Ling Gao. As Jane mentioned, I'm one of the International Student Advisor at IS's office. So in this slide, we're going to dive into the concept of non-discretionary and non-optional, as you may have heard about this term a lot recently, and some of the facts that may take into account in the assessment of the purpose of travel being essential. So under normal circumstances, you will be required to have a valid study permit or have been approved for a study permit outside of Canada. And unless you are a US citizen, you will also be required to have a valid temporary resident visa or an electronic travel authorization, depending on nationality, to facilitate your entry into Canada as a study permit holder. Now, during the global pandemic and to manage the outbreak of COVID-19, you may have already been aware that the government of Canada has implemented travel restrictions to stop most foreign nationals from entering Canada for non-essential travel unless they meet specific exemptions outlined in the applicable order in council, as also known as the minimizing the risk of exposure to COVID-19 in Canada orders. So there are two sets of travel restrictions. One is specific to any foreign national seeking to enter Canada directly from the United States. And the other one is for foreign nationals seeking to enter Canada from any other countries aside from the United States. I know it's confusing, so bear with me on this. The travel restrictions are based on where you will be entering Canada, the point of the point of entry, so either directly from the US or outside the US, not based on the nationality or citizenship. I just want to make it that clear. The travel restriction on entering from the US has been extended to August the 21st, 2020, and restriction for entries from other countries other than the US has also been recently extended to August the 31st this year. I also want to be clear that those days does not necessarily mean restriction will be lifted after those days. Actually, depending on how the COVID-19 continues to evolve, travel restriction may be lifted, changed, or extended if needed. So under the current travel restrictions, there are a few requirements that all students, including those who will be traveling directly from the United States, must meet in order to be exempt. So first of all, you must have a credible quarantine plan for 14 days in place upon your return in Canada, and we're going to touch more on this topic later. You must be traveling for Canada for essential purpose, and that's what we're going to talk about here. And of course, you must have no symptoms of COVID-19. If you have any signs or symptoms of COVID-19, you will not be permitted to travel to Canada. Regardless of where you'll be traveling to Canada from, again, you must demonstrate that the purpose of your travel is essential or non-discretionary. Recently, Immigration Refugee Situation Canada, IRCC, has released some guidance on what factors may be considered by the border service officer in assessing the circumstances surrounding a student's travel. And we have listed those factors on this slide here. So for example, and border service office may consider, are you already established? Are you currently residing? Are you currently studying in Canada? If a foreign national is already established in Canada, then their return is considered non-discretionary. So if you're already living here and you can prove that you're established already in Canada, then returning to a primary residence in Canada is considered non-discretionary. The other consideration would be, for example, are your presence in Canada necessary for you to continue participation in the program in the fall, such as labs or workshops? Do you have any courses that require or have any in-person attendance in the fall term? The officer may also consider whether or not it's possible, if it's an option for you to pursue online studies in your home country. If there's any kind of IT infrastructure issues, such as maybe internet restrictions or bandwidth limitation, that you may not be able to engage online learnings abroad. Are you expected to begin studying upon arrival after completing your quarantine period? Another factor could be that has the semester been canceled, or will you begin your studying later in the year? So if you will not be beginning your study upon approval right after your quarantine period, then there may be grounds to be considered that the travel may not be considered as essential at this point. And it's also important to note that the onus will be on you to satisfy an officer at a port of entry that the purpose of your traveling to Canada is essential. That's to say that your physical presence in Canada is necessary at this time. The final determination on your eligibility to enter Canada is made by a border service officer when you arrive at a port of entry. So the decision is not being made by an immigration officer or the visa office or an airline staff or SFU. Only the border service officer at a port of entry is going to make the final determination that whether or not you will meet the travel exemptions. The requirements of traveling for non-discretionary purpose apply to all international students, regardless if you're seeking to enter Canada directly from the States or outside the States. There's an exemption to this requirement of non-discretionary purpose for foreign nationals who are actually coming to stay with a Canadian citizen or permanent resident as an immediate family in Canada for at least 15 days. But we're not going to dive to details here. So in the next slide, we will discuss more on exemptions for foreign nationals entering Canada from countries outside the United States. Thank you, Jean. So if you will be entering Canada from outside the States, outside the United States, in addition to meeting the requirements on what we just discussed, in terms of purpose of your travel being non-discretionary, having a credible quarantine plan, you must also hold one of the documents listed in this slide, which is either you have a valid study permit or you have a letter of introduction that was issued on or before March 18th, confirming that your study permit application has been approved. So for the letter of introduction, this is a document to be issued for study permit application process and approved outside Canada. It's not the same as holding a valid study permit. If you apply for study permit outside of Canada, upon arrival in Canada, you will present this letter of introduction to obtain your actual study permit at a port of entry under normal circumstances. So what does this mean is, even if, let's say, your purpose of travel may be essential, but if you do not hold a valid study permit or you have not been approved for a study permit by March 18th, you will not be allowed to travel to Canada if you will be coming to Canada from outside the United States. So I want to make that very clear. Now, aside from meeting the travel exemptions based on your point of entry, either directly from the U.S. or outside the states, you must also have a valid temporary resident visa or electronic travel authorization, unless you are a U.S. citizen, to allow you to enter Canada. I also wanted to point it out that you must also have a valid study permit in order for you to engage your studies when you're physically in Canada. So if you're currently already in Canada as a visitor, but you don't have a valid study permit, let's say you have applied for a study permit outside of Canada, you're waiting for the outcome, or if you just have a letter of introduction confirming your study permit has been approved abroad, but you don't have the actual study permit, and you're here in Canada right now as a visitor, unfortunately, you cannot start your program and you cannot start studying online in the fall term. On the other hand, if you're currently outside Canada and you will be taking courses online remotely by being outside of Canada, you may start your programs without having a valid study permit, but a study permit will be required to complete all in Canada components of your studies later on. And if you have any other questions, we could definitely cover that in the Q&A part. So in the next slides, we will discuss what supporting documents may also help in demonstrating the purpose of your travel. All right, thank you. So here you will find a list of examples of documentations you should have or carry along with you when traveling to Canada. The list is not exhaustive, so it really depending on your own unique circumstances in meeting the travel exemptions. You should consider what other documentations are relevant, or any of those documentation listed here are relevant in demonstrating why your physical presence in Canada is essential. For example, if you'll be taking a courses in the fall term that does have an in-person component, it is our understanding that SFU is currently working on a letter for students who have in-person components of classes for the fall. And if you're one of those students, you should expect to receive some communication from the university soon. If you're already established in Canada, you should also include documentation to demonstrate that your establishments or your ties that you already have with Canada, such as your social ties, personal ties, financial ties, employment ties you already have. Document to prove that how long you have been living in Canada, how long you have been studying in Canada. Anything that to prove that your absence from Canada is on a temporary basis may also be helpful. I wanted to point out that there's unfortunately no a magic formula or like a perfect document checklist for what document could guarantee your entry in Canada at this point. Even if you have maybe scored everything on this IRCC guidelines we have discussed, ultimately the final decision will be made by the border service officer. So even if, let's say, you do have in-person class in the fall and you have a letter from SFU confirming that, there's still no guarantee that you'll be allowed to enter Canada. And unfortunately, SFU is also not in the position to issue any other letters surrounding your own circumstances or challenges you have with online learning, such as maybe internet issues or time zone difference. So the honestly will be on you to demonstrate, what kind of challenges and why you have to be physically in Canada to take the courses in person, and why online learning may not be an option for you. And also just a reminder, I think it would be important for you to assess first if you meet the travel exemptions, and also to consider, should you actually consider traveling at this point, taking everything into consideration. Is there really an essential reason for you to be physically in Canada in the fall term, and if so, how will you be able to demonstrate that to the officer? And if you have family members who will be moving along with you to Canada, they should also have their own documents as well. And then, so let's move to the next slide and we can touch more on that topic as well. All right, thank you. So some of you may have accompanied family members who will be traveling along with you. Or if you're currently already in Canada, your family member may want to reunite with you in Canada. So depending on where your family member will be entering, so either directly from the United States or outside the United States, the travel exemption for your family member will be different. So if your family member will be coming to Canada directly from the United States, then they must demonstrate that their purpose travel is for non-discretionary purpose. If they will be traveling from outside the USA, they must first obtain written authorization from Immigration and Refugee Citizen Canada to be allowed to travel. To do so, they will need to send an email to a designated RCC email address to request for written authorization. And as part of that process, they must demonstrate that they can travel, they are traveling for a non-discretionary purpose. Again, they must all have, regardless of where they will be coming, where they will be coming directly from the U.S. or outside the states, they must also have valid immigration document to enter Canada, such as a temporary resident visa or electronic travel authorizations, unless they're exempted. Under the family reunification provisions, generally a relocation move to accompany a family member, such as spouse or parent who is coming to Canada to establish themselves for an essential reason, let's say for studying, should be considered for essential. Okay, and upon receipt of the written authorization request, your family member should expect to receive a response within 5 business days by RCC to inform them, what to do next. So in the next slides, we will talk more about the self-isolation plan. Right, thank you. In addition to the travel restriction in place, to slow down the spread of COVID-19 in Canada, the government of Canada has also put in place an emergency order under the Quarantine Act that applies to all travelers with only a few exemptions. So the current order under the Quarantine Act is in place until August 31st this year, but also may be extended. Upon arrival in Canada, all international travelers must quarantine for 14 days. They also need to provide their contact information and monitor themselves for symptoms. This mandatory quarantine requirements apply to all models of traveling, including air, land, or sea. And even if you don't have any symptoms related to COVID-19, this is also mandatory for the quarantine. If you'll be arriving in Canada by air or land, you may provide your basic information within 48 hours before you arrive through an app known as the Arrive Can. This app can be downloaded through the App Store or Google Play apps, or you can also do it in a paper form or the online web form. And it is your responsibility to make the necessary arrangements so that you can appropriate quarantine for 14 days after you arrive, and your ability to do so will be assessed by the officer at the port of entry when you arrive. You must also have a credible self-isolation plan, which is also a legal commitment to quarantine, enforceable under the Public Health Act. Even if you don't have COVID-19 symptoms, again, it's mandatory to have a self-isolation plan and quarantine for 14 days upon your arrival. By not following your quarantine plans, you may be fined and also subject to 6 months of jail time. So it is pretty serious consequences. And in the self-isolation plan, you will need to outline where and how you will self-isolate for 14 days, transportation arrangements to get to your self-isolation location from the airport, arrangements you have made or will make for necessary supplies to be delivered to you. It is also strongly recommended that it would be a good idea for you to actually have a written self-isolation plan to include all the necessary information. It will be reviewed by the border service officer to meet the quarantine requirements. That means staying home, avoid situation where you could come into contact with other people for 14 days. All international travelers arriving in BC must also submitting their own self-isolation plan aside from the federal requirements under the Quarantine Act. It is strongly recommended that you should complete and submit a self-isolation plan online before you arrive in BC. In the follow-up email, so after sessions, we'll be sending out a follow-up emails. We're going to include a few resources and list where you can find more information about all the links and as well as self-isolation guides, which you're going to find some helpful tips and resources. And also information on how to complete the BC self-isolation plan online. Additional screening measures are being taken at the Vancouver International Airport. So you can find more information on that in the follow-up emails. I know it's a lot of information already we just covered. I'm going to pass the stage to my colleague at Health Counseling Services, Ricky and Brittany, to tell you a little bit more about what self-isolation means and how to care for your physical and mental health during this period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mei Ling. Hi, everyone. My name is Ricky. I'm the Transition Case Manager here at SFU Health and Counselling. So myself and Brittany will now speak about the health and wellness considerations. A quick overview of our services here at SFU Health and Counselling. We have a team of doctors, psychologists, mental health nurses available to help you during your studies here. Please note that due to COVID-19, many of our services are going to be online. We are seeing students through Zoom or by telephone. If you need to see one of our providers, please call the numbers listed on the slide. An important fact to remember, due to medical laws, we're currently not able to provide any services to anyone who is not living in British Columbia. Now, Brittany will present about COVID-related information.
Thank you, Ricky. My name is Brittany. I'm one of the mental health nurses working at SFU Health and Counselling Services. To begin, I'm going to give a quick overview about what COVID-19 is. So COVID-19 is an infectious disease and a newly discovered coronavirus. The COVID-19 virus spreads primarily through droplets of saliva or discharge from the nose when an infected person coughs or sneezes. It can also be spread through close personal contact or by touching something that has the virus living on it, and then touching your eyes, nose, or mouth before washing your hands. On the next slide, we'll discuss monitoring your symptoms. Symptoms for COVID-19 may range from mild to severe. Symptoms are often similar to those of other respiratory illnesses such as the flu. These include coughing, sneezing, sore throat, difficulty breathing, and most commonly a fever. It's important to note that symptoms may appear up to 14 days after exposure to the virus. On the next slide, we'll be discussing self-isolation. So upon your arrival to Canada, it is mandatory under the Quarantine Act for you to self-isolate for 14 days. Self-isolation is also required anytime after an exposure to a confirmed case of COVID-19. Self-isolation means staying at home or at place of accommodation. Do not go to work, school, public areas, and do not use public transportation. Ask friends, relatives if you need help with groceries and medications. There are also grocery stores and pharmacies that offer delivery services. During self-isolation, you should not have any visitors unless they are helping with your care or delivering items. Remember to maintain a distance of 2 meters or wear a non-medical mask if this is not possible. It is also important to clean and disinfect highly touched surfaces regularly. The self-isolation period may end after 14 days if you have not developed any symptoms. If you do develop symptoms, you should be tested for COVID-19. You may require a longer period of self-isolation as you will be asked to isolate for a minimum of 10 days after the onset of any symptoms. So for example, if you begin to develop symptoms on day 6 of your self-isolation period, you will need to continue to isolate for another 10 days, which would extend your period of isolation to a total of 16 days. If you think you have COVID-19, you should self-isolate and self-monitor your symptoms. Use the BC COVID-19 self-assessment tool for guidance. We will provide the website for this on an upcoming slide. If you are in BC, you may call 811 if you have further questions after using the self-assessment tool, or contact SFU Health and Counselling Clinic, the numbers listed on the slide there, to see if you need to be assessed further by a physician. If your symptoms are severe, such as shortness of breath or chest pain, you will need to go to the nearest emergency room or call 911. What to expect if you are being tested. A nasopharyngeal swab is inserted into the nose for collection of a sample. The process is typically quick, however, it may feel quite uncomfortable and you may feel the urge to cough or sneeze afterwards. Where to find your test results. You will be contacted by Public Health if test results are positive. Negative test results can be obtained by calling the BC CDC COVID-19 negative results line. Number is listed on the slide there, and their hours are between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. You may also visit the BC CDC website to sign up and get your negative test results via text message, or alternatively obtain the results through My eHealth website. So you may want to take a photo of the slide for your own reference. The BC CDC is a great resource for any questions you may have related to COVID-19 protocols here in BC. The COVID-19 self-assessment tool that I previously mentioned can be found at bc.thrive.health. After completing the assessment tool, it'll direct you to next steps, which may include calling 811 regarding getting tested. Please familiarize yourself with the SFU Health and Counselling's website at sfu.ca/students/health for more information about our services. I will now hand it over to Ricky to discuss wellness and ways to maintain our well-being.
Thank you, Brittany. So we'll like to shift the focus to look at wellness and how to maintain our well-being during COVID while you study at SFU. Wellness is an active, lifelong process of becoming aware of your choices and making decisions that will help you live a more balanced and fulfilling life. Everyone's optimal wellness will be different, depending on your own needs, experiences, personality, and circumstances. Different aspects will fall in and out of balance as you make your way through life. However, we can try our best to maintain a balance. Many factors can influence your health and well-being. As you can see, there are 7 dimensions of wellness here. We are interested in how to maintain and promote your well-being during COVID. First, we need to recognize some of the changes you may experience with COVID. Changes impacting our sleep. As we don't need to attend in-person classes and having things done online, it can impact our sleep, such that we may sleep later in the night or we may wake up later. This change in our sleep schedule can impact us negatively as it changes our entire routine for the day. Our exercise and diet can change as well. As we are indoors and not traveling around as much, we have reduced our physical movement. And add the fact that we are at home, we might be eating more junk food than we want. These 2 factors can impact our energy levels as we might not be able to burn the extra energy, leaving us feeling lethargic. Our social connections have changed as well. Often we hear the term social distance, which implies we need to distance ourselves socially, but this is incorrect. We need to maintain a physical distance, but we can still connect socially. We are social beings. Without connecting with others, it can have a negative impact on our sense of selves. Our motivation can also be impacted as well. As all your classes are online and from your home, we might be more easily distracted and we might procrastinate. For example, we may procrastinate as some of our classes are asynchronous. You may not do the work right away, but it may grow faster than you expected, leaving you feeling deterred or defeated. And needless to say, all of these changes will impact our mental health and well-being and how we cope. So how do we combat these negative impacts? Well, here are our top 3 tips. Number 1, create and follow a routine. To combat the changes mentioned in the previous slide, it's best to keep and maintain a routine. Maintain a regular wake up and sleep time as if you're attending classes. This will help to create a pattern and internal rhythm for us. Make sure to schedule time to study, eat, play, and connect with others as well. When creating your routine, start small, build your goals up slowly. Number 2, reduce screen time and get moving. Put the phone down, shut down the computer. Everything is online now and the term Zoom fatigue is real. We get tired from sitting and looking at our screens all day. Get moving, get those energy levels back up. Simply going for a walk if you can. Now, if you can't go for a walk because you're in quarantine, we recommend attending the SFU recreational classes from the comfort of your own home. Number 3, stay socially connected. Maintain and having quality relationships with others is important. Despite their physical distance from others, you can still connect. Use your technology, connect with someone, such as using a phone call. Now, if you're no longer in quarantine, you can also organize a physically distanced picnic with a friend. A few more ways to maintain your well-being is to reach out and talk to one of us. We're happy to provide any support here at Health and Counselling. Try some of our self-directed programs, such as our Bouncing Forward program. We also have free classes online at Health and Counselling here, like our mindfulness meditation class. If you're stuck in quarantine, try out some free virtual tours at different art galleries as well. Lastly, I mentioned in the beginning that if you're not in British Columbia, we're not able to provide you with any services. But we do have the My SSP program, or the My Student Support Program. This is a free mental health support program available to any SFU student. You can access it even if you're not in Canada. The program is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call the number located on the slide, or you can download the app from the Google Play Store or Apple Play Store. Thanks for listening to me. Now I'll turn it back to Jean and Mei Ling.
Thank you, Ricky and Brittany. Hello, everyone. It's me again. So thank you, Brittany and Ricky, for this very well-said information and on this very important topics on how to maintain our mental health during the quarantine time. And so before we stop the recording and open up the floor for questions, I would like to leave you with a quick recap of some of the key points that we have covered in today's presentation. So first is a consideration when determining whether or not or when you should be traveling. So I understand that some of you are or were looking forward to traveling and moving to Canada. May also have questions about whether you will be able to travel to Canada for the full term under the current travel restrictions. I would say, unfortunately, we don't have a clear-cut answer for you. I really wish we do. And again, it's really going to be up to the border service officer to determine if you will meet the travel exemptions, if you're coming here for an essential purpose, and if you will have a credible quarantine plan in place. If you're considering traveling at this time and would like to have a more authoritative opinion on your eligibility to do so, my recommendation is to contact the Canada Border Service Agency through their Border Information Service line before finalizing your travel plans, and their contact information will be included in the follow-up emails that we'll be sending out later. Each individual case and circumstances is different. So that's the reason why we don't have a cookie-cut approach to responses on who should or who should not travel. Instead, this is really up to you and your personal decision after taking into account various factors such as your eligibility to travel by meeting the exemptions, what your priorities are at this point. Do you feel safe about traveling internationally? We really recommend that you should, throughout taking all those factors into account and then making informed decisions on whether or not you should travel. For example, do you meet the current travel exemption as we discussed? And also maybe some of you already know that it is mandatory if you are traveling to Canada by air to actually wear a non-medical mask or face covering, including through the traveling, including to your isolation location. So if you'll be taking a very long international flights, let's say for 10 or more hours, do you feel comfortable doing that? And especially if you'll be traveling with your families, with small kids, is that feasible to do it? And are there any flights available right now from your home country or where your country resides, from that location to Canada at this point? And what is your own comfort level in taking up on the risk of making the travel plans with no guarantee and possibility that you may not be allowed to enter Canada eventually? Are you comfortable with taking that risk? What supports are available during the quarantine and your time in Canada? How can you make those arrangements to meet the self-isolation requirements? So before jumping too quickly into the question of how can I meet the travel exemptions and what can I do to facilitate my return to Canada, I think the first and probably the most important question is to ask ourselves. It's like doing a self-assessment process, reflecting on your own circumstances, and the consideration is, should I be traveling at this point? And make a decision, in the absence of any very clear or concrete information from the authorities, with the uncertainties that you may face. So I know this is not a very easy decision for you to make. And another tip that you want to consider is you may also want to check with the airlines. I know some of you may have already booked a flight, so if that's the case, you may also check with your airlines in advance to find out if they require any specific documentation from you. As my colleague Jean has mentioned previously, you can also visit our website, which you're going to find a lot of information on the application process, as well as COVID-19 FAQ webpage, which we do update as new information becomes available. We also have welcome guides for new students, which include some step-by-step checklists and items that it's going to help you to prepare for your transition to SFU. If you are not so sure where even to start with the self-isolation or the quarantine requirements, we also have a self-isolation guide there under that page. We do recommend that you should closely monitor the travel restrictions and exemptions on the Government Canada's website for the most up-to-date information on restrictions and requirements to entry into Canada, because things have been changing very rapidly in the past few months. Last but not least, hopefully some of you will be able to join us for our upcoming sessions. If you're new international undergrad students starting in the fall, we're going to have another Q&A session on medical insurance and support next week, August the 12th. We will also be hosting another live Q&A for families of all new international undergrad students on August the 14th. And of course, for those who are watching the recording, if you have any questions after watching this video and reviewing our resources, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Now, if you're a new grad student, this is the last Q&A session we have planned for now, but we'll be looking into planning more of those sessions in the fall, so stay tuned for more information. And so let's move to the next slide. Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to end the recording now. So you're going to probably hear another notification to let you know that recording will be stopped. And to those who are watching the record versions, again, thank you for watching, and we're very excited and to welcome you to SFU in whatever form that may take this year, and wish you all the best.